In just a few hours, in that building behind me in the United States Capitol, the President of the United States is going to come before the United States and our country and anybody watching around the world, and he's going to tell you what he believes is the state of the union, how things are. You know how these things always work. They always kind of tell you what they want you to believe. They're going to cherry pick all the things that are the best, and they're going to give the best interpretations and make it sound like, man, everything is going great. You should definitely vote for me again later this year. That's the normal thing that they do. I'm going to come and tell you today, though, what the real state of the union is on the four of the issues anyway, that are of most important to Americans and have the most impact on your future and even on your present, too. So I'm going to tell you what's really going on, and then I'm going to go one better, and I'm going to tell you what should be the State of the Union, what he should be telling us today, and what I wish any American president would say instead of the fare that we normally get. But let's just jump right into it. We're going to actually talk about the Asia Pacific area. We're going to talk about Europe. We're going to talk about the Middle East, and we're going to talk about the U.S. border. And then we're going to wrap all that up together and give you a vision for what it should be. So first of all, let's start off in the Asia Pacific area. Now, the biggest issue over there, of course, is our growing competition with China, the rise of China, the military threat, the South China Seas, all the issues going on. Of course, all of it centered around Taiwan. And will Taiwan ever declare independence from China? Will China say that, well, we don't even want to worry about it anymore, we're just going to invade? Because there's certainly been lots of claims over the last couple of years, in particular by senior American admirals and other officials that say, there's a countdown clock and it's going on, and soon China is going to make that move. And there's actually been in the news just the last few days, there's been some increasing issues on some of the outlying Taiwan islands that are actually right by the Chinese mainland, with the Chinese Coast Guard interdicting some fishing boats and some tourist boats and just really causing lots of troubles. And that's on top of the last couple of 2 or 3 years where they've been increasing their air patrols, their military patrols in the oceans and in the seas, drones, aircraft, all kinds of stuff. So there's lots of going on over there, and it deserves to be talked about, and we need to have a good vision for that. But the issue that has raised or has kind of guided American policies since the 1970s has been the one state solution, where there is one China. The one China policy is what they call it, to where it's really ambiguous, that we have strategic ambiguity. We don't say that we're going to do something. We don't say we're not going to do something. We just kind of leave it up to everybody to figure out so that it stays, the status quo kind of stays on, where Taiwan in all aspects of reality is an independent nation, if not in name, but that's in reality how it is. And a lot of people want that status quo to continue on, so there's no violence, no bloodshed, no wars with anybody, and people can keep living their lives. That's kind of what people want. President Biden, though, threw that into some confusion in the earlier part of his administration, and he's actually said this several times, but here's one of the big ones he said right here.
Are you willing to get involved militarily to defend Taiwan if it comes to that?
Yes.
You are?
That's the commitment we made. That's the commitment we made. We are not, look, here's the situation. We agree with a one China policy. We've signed on to it, and all the attendant agreements made from there. But the idea that it can be taken by force, just taken by force, is just not appropriate. It will dislocate the entire region and be another action similar to what happened in Ukraine.
Now, he said this at least 4 times. I want to say it was actually 5 times in the earlier part of his administration, especially before the Russia-Ukraine war kind of dominated the info space here. And each one of those times, the administration subsequently walked it back and said, well, that's not actually what he meant. But look, folks, that's what he said. He said, yes, we would fight. That's what we've agreed to. No, we didn't. Let's be clear on that. We did not agree to anything. And because especially the tensions are continuing to ratchet up, Taiwan just had an election in January where they elected a pro-democracy candidate, and that's increased tensions even higher. It is absolutely not in American interest at all in any capacity to fight China in a war over Taiwan. And I'm going to talk about it toward the end of this, of what the options are, what we can do instead. But I'll just point blank categorically tell you, under no circumstances should the United States ever get into a shooting war with nuclear-armed China over the Taiwan issue. The only time we should even contemplate it is if we are attacked, and then it's a whole different ballgame. But if we're not, we cannot get into a war with China. Now then, let's move over to the Middle East here, because that's kind of obviously a lot in the news this late. And there's, as I'm going to show you in a second, that's definitely going to be on the agenda during the State of the Union speech tonight. And that is especially what's going on in terms of the Gaza Strip and the people within it. Because obviously, just a real quick recap, the Hamas conducted a terrorist attack against Israel back in October of last year, a heinous, horrific attack that killed over 1,000 innocent Israeli people and spurred a war for Israel to go after the Hamas fighters and terrorists inside the Gaza Strip. Now, at that point, there was a broad-based acceptance among the Western world and most of the world, for that matter, even many in the Middle East, that it was right and appropriate for Israel to go after Hamas, even in the Strip, as long as they did it the right way. Now, I'll just tell you, I have 4 combat deployments, and I fought in both Iraq and Afghanistan, and I was a part of some of these operations that took place. So I know what intelligence-driven operations that protect the population look like. I know that, in built-up urban areas where they're hiding, and you can't really tell who's who, and you don't know which one's a terrorist and which one's just a guy who's, taking care of his family. It's very difficult, very time-consuming, but it can be done at the tactical level. Now, there's bigger issues at the strategic level, but I'm just talking about on the ground in the war. There is definitely a way to do it right, because if you were attacked in a terrorist attack, by every convention and every law, you have the right to self-defense to go after those people who did that to you. What you don't have the right to do, however, is to just go in this mass area to eradicate the ability of an entire population to live, to not only not care about the population, but wantonly kill tens of thousands of them, especially thousands upon thousands of innocent women and children. And that is unequivocally happening in the Gaza Strip on a routine basis. So now the question has to be, what is in America's vital national interest? And we have supported Israel, as I said, from the beginning, and we have for decades. But if it gets to a point to where American interests are coming under fire and are being worked against, then changes have to be made. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be having very much effect, because Biden, at first, when this first happened, he said, yes, I think in November of last year, he said, hey, definitely a 2-state solution is what we're going to do. But then Netanyahu kept saying, and some of his senior officials kept saying, there's not going to be a 2-state solution. So in January of this year, a reporter caught President Biden as he was moving from one event to another and asking him again, hey, what about this 2-state solution?
Reconsider conditions on Israel aid, given what Netanyahu said about a 1-state.
I think we'll be able to work something out.
What does that mean?
There are a number of types of 2-state solutions. There's a number of countries that are members of the UN that are still don't have their own military. A number of states that have limitations on it. And so I think there's ways in which this could work.
But Bibi has said he's opposed to any of two-state solutions. So what is he open to?
I'll let you know.
Did you talk about it this morning?
See, the reporter, God bless her, to her credit, she pressed him. She said, wait a minute, no, Netanyahu, Bibi, did say that there's no 2-state solution. What do you say to that? Because he said that he talks to him all the time. Well, it turns out that Netanyahu was still unequivocal. No, there's not going to be a 2-state solution. He keeps saying it. He said, subsequent to that interview, he said, we are going to dominate from the river to the sea. Everything between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean is going to be ours. We're going to rule it. That means the West Bank. That means Gaza. That means no 2-state solution by definition. And yet you don't see any action from the president. We continue to get plane load after plane load of military supplies, bombs, bullets, missiles, interceptors, all kinds of stuff, cash, probably intelligence as well. And you still have the Israeli government taking actions antithetical to our interests. And then you have to raise the question, who's actually in charge of American foreign policy? If the Americans keep saying that you can't do this or you must do that and none of that happens, then you have to say, who's running the show here? Now, that was even more pointedly brought out just I guess yesterday when Matt Miller, State Department official, was asked, what is it about the this issue of getting aid into there that the U.S. keeps saying they must do? Is there a stop? Is there a red line to this to where finally the White House is going to do something? And Matt Miller was pretty emphatic about how he saw it.
Not only is the situation on the ground right now in Gaza unacceptable, but it's unsustainable. It cannot continue this way. You have seen the United States take action to airdrop food supplies in. You have seen us take action to fund the delivery of humanitarian assistance. You have seen us announce that we are exploring a maritime option to deliver humanitarian assistance through new routes, but it still is incumbent upon the government of Israel to do more as well. We have seen some improvement in the distribution, but we need to see dramatically more go in. We need to see it go in not just through Rafah and Kerem Shalom, but we need to see it go in through a crossing in the north. And we have made very clear to the government of Israel that's what we expect, and that we expect to see improvement. And as the president said, there can be no excuses.
Yeah, he's walked himself into a bind here. And apparently one of the things he mentioned there about a maritime issue is going to be brought up tonight, and I'll get to that in just a second. But look, he has put the president now by name on the line, he said, no excuses. These things have to be done, or there's going to be, well, he didn't say or, he just said they say no more excuses. So now what are we going to do if Netanyahu, subsequent to this, because every time he has said something, Netanyahu has done something different. A couple of days ago, in response to what the vice president said about how there must be an immediate ceasefire, we are insistent upon it. This is what Netanyahu said.
The war continues and will continue until the end, until we achieve all our goals. The cruelty of the kidnappers, eliminating Hamas, and ensuring that it will no longer pose a threat to Israel, sparing no one. We will persevere and continue our relentless fight on land, sea, and air until we achieve total and undeniable victory.
He didn't say anything in there about a ceasefire, didn't say anything in there about increasing civilian aid, didn't say anything about anything except we're going to continue on to drive towards complete and total victory. And if you watched our show earlier today or any of the others that we've had, I keep emphatically pointing out there is no military solution that what they're attempting to do will be accomplished. And what their objective is bring peace to the people of Israel. This ain't going to do it, folks. All it's going to do is create much, much more animosity and hatred for Israel. And every time we keep providing more of the ammunition to allow it, that by dent comes onto us and will harm our interest in the region, as we've already seen it happen. And let me reiterate this, because we have already lost American troops killed in action in Jordan because of the reaction to the people in the region, some of these Iran-backed groups who took action against our people, specifically in support of the Palestinian people being killed in the Israeli-Hamas war. Now, that brings us to the second point. When we're talking about the region here, is the issue is that we have troops on the ground in Syria and in Iraq that are doing nothing for American national security interests. They are not doing this whole mess you may hear people claim about an anti-ISIS mission. That's just covering. That's just like wordplay. There's no reality to any of that, folks. I'm just here to tell you point blank, it's not true. That's what they claim. We should have gotten them out there a long time ago. Those troops should still be alive today that died a month or so ago. And all the rest of those folks are still at risk. I'm going to talk more about that in a minute as well. But unfortunately, instead of holding Israel accountable and saying, hey, you either start doing the things that we need or there's going to be some consequences into the support, it appears that tonight, right across the street here, that President Biden is going to say, you know what, how about this? How about we avoid this maritime conflict and we actually bring in, according to this is breaking news here that's just coming out, and Biden's tonight, he's going to announce that we're going to actually set up an emergency mission to establish a temporary port in Gaza that will maintain maritime routes for humanitarian assistance. Look, folks, that's not America's job. We should be telling the Israeli government, you started this war. You're going in, you're destroying every way that these people can live. So you need to be the one that provides this. Now, look, there's hundreds of food trucks out there. We've shown some of the video. I bet Gary will throw some of that up here in a minute. There's hundreds upon hundreds of trucks waiting to get in, but Israel is blocking most of those and not allowing them to. So instead of just telling Israel, open the damn gates, what we're doing is we're going to say, hey, we're going to bring American ships, bring American troops into areas where it's actually into conflict with some of these and the potential for this to escalate. And we're going to do that job for them. We're going to provide more food aid from the sea. That's not a job that the United States should do. If we're showing leadership, we need to be tough and firm with our friend and ally Israel. That's what we should be doing. But unfortunately, that's not how it's going. That's the truth on what's happening in the Middle East. Next, let's go to the other hot spot here, and that's with the Russia-Ukraine war. Now, look, after 2 years of military failure, by every stretch of the imagination, by any accounting, by any definition, clearly Ukraine has not, and will not win that war against Russia. Now, rational and logical, if you're providing leadership, if you want to do something that's positive for the American people and for our allies in Europe and for the people on the ground in Ukraine, the reasonable thing to do is to say, let's bring this to a close. That's what we should be doing. But instead, we're ignoring all the realities. And here's what we have been saying. In fact, here's what President Biden is saying, what he's looking for as the resolution.
This bipartisan bill sends a clear message to Ukrainians and to our partners and to our allies around the world. America can be trusted. America can be relied upon. And America stands up for freedom. We stand strong for our allies. We never bow down to anyone, and certainly not to Vladimir Putin.
Now, that briefs well. I mean, that sounds, a lot of people go, yeah, that Putin, he's a bad guy. He's evil, as Nancy Pelosi said in a recent episode, or in a recent clip that she had on CNN. Okay, look, no one's defending Putin. There's lots of things he's done heinous and horrible and killed people like possibly Navalny and certainly some others that definitely have died at his hands. This whole war that he's fighting, there are many other ways that they could have handled their problems short of war. And so, yeah, he's a bad guy. But there's an issue about what's real, what can you do, and what can't you do. If the reality on the ground, and it is, that Ukraine can't win this war, then by ignoring that reality and instead sitting to the spin and the popular statements and narratives that we don't like Russia, so we're going to keep providing money, all you're doing is deepening the harm to the Ukraine people. You're keeping the war on life support. You're keeping the war on life support, not the people, but the war on life support. So it continues on by giving them enough to keep it going, but there's not enough. There's no amount of equipment that's going to allow them to win. Make very clear on that point. It doesn't matter if we emptied our arsenals and just sent everything over there. It's manpower. It's not machines. It's not money. It's manpower. And Ukraine doesn't have what it takes to win that war. So while us continuing to feed the fiction, we are setting the stage for this to continue festering, more Ukrainian people to die, and the possibility that this escalates. Because the other area where we're doing a very bad job of leadership, we can't even control our own allies. Because we've been talking a lot about French President Macron, who's been going on kind of off the reservation, talking about he's going to send troops and special forces into Ukraine. We've had the Germans that said actually he has already been doing that. So has the UK. They've been sending troops covertly into Ukraine to help them with some of their long-range attacks against Russian forces. Now Macron, I believe it was earlier today, is again saying, hey, look, we need to forget about there should be no more red lines. We shouldn't even worry about that kind of stuff. We should give them Ukraine more and more of everything, as though he's either oblivious to combat realities and how things work, or I don't even know what if the alternative is, unless he's somehow seeking war and has just lost his mind, because Vladimir Putin has been very outspoken and very clear about what happens if NATO crosses the red line. Macron says we should ignore.
They should eventually understand that we also have weapons, and they know it. I just said it now myself, weapons that can hit targets on their territory. Everything that the West is coming up with now, what they threaten the world with, it can result in a conflict with the use of nuclear weapons, and therefore the destruction of civilization.
Now, look, there's nothing new about that. This is actually, and we won't play it right now, but you can look back to some of our previous episodes to where right before this war started in February of 2022, in early February, Macron went to talk to Putin in Moscow, in the Kremlin, and he talked about, different things that might happen if Russia goes ahead and invades. And Putin was very clear at that point to say, if you cross those red lines, then this could go to nuclear war. He was very clear on that. He said, I don't want to do it, Nobody will win if we do it, but there is no way that I'm going to allow another force, a nuclear tipped military alliance, nuclear equipped, to come into and potentially attack our troops and to go to war with us. There's no way we'll do anything else. And folks, just, do you think that we would do anything different? Would we have any different if this was, say, an issue in Mexico or an issue in Canada, that they were going to have some kind of a military alliance with China or with Russia, and we're going to allow their troops actually onto their soil, all the while saying, hey, this is just a defensive alliance? How many of you out there in the video that's watching this, raise your hand, how many of you would say, yeah, we'll be cool with that as long as it's a defensive alliance, it's no problem? See, I don't see any hands up. That's because you're smart. That's why you guys are watching this channel, because you know that we're giving you the truth, and the truth is obvious. Of course we would react the same way. We'd go crazy if anybody even comes in our hemisphere, much less a military alliance on our borders. Why, in what logic would anyone think that the other nuclear power in Europe, Russia, would be different, that they would do that different? So if you're pushing an issue here to try and to make them act in ways you would never act, all we're doing is setting ourselves up for the potential to actually stumbling on this red line one day, and then God only knows what could happen. Once that nuclear genie gets out of the bottle, God help us all, because then no amount of diplomacy or sanity is going to infer, and then you have, well, you know where that could go. I don't even need to talk any further on that one. Moving on, let's go to the other area that you're probably going to hear something about tonight, and that is the United States border. Now, this big package that was passed a month or so ago, or several weeks ago now in the Senate, it was called the American National Security Package. Curiously enough, didn't actually include any money for America's border, for America's national security. It included money for Israel, included money for Taiwan, it included money for Ukraine, but nothing for the border, which I found was kind of an odd thing. But Biden claims that this is actually not his fault at all. He's done nothing. In fact, he's saying that it's an issue with the Congress.
Folks, the bipartisan border security deal is a win for the American people. And it's a win for the people of Texas, and it's fair for those who legitimately have a right to come here to begin with. It's a win for the people of Brownsville, and I believe that's why the Border Patrol Union endorsed it. I believe that's why the National Chamber of Commerce endorsed it. So it's like it's always something else. I have this good plan if only it would be done. But he's been in office. Look, he won the 2020 election, and nothing has happened since then. And as Mr. Holman talked on Capitol Hill not long ago, former ICE director laid out pretty starkly what the real situation is on the border.
I started my career in immigration enforcement in 1984 as a Border Patrol agent. I've worked for 6 presidents, up to Donald Trump. Every president I've ever worked for took some steps to secure the border, because they understood you can't have strong national security if you don't have border security. But President Biden is the first president in history of this nation that I know of who came in office and unsecured a border on purpose. So we went for the most secure border of my lifetime, and it's not just my opinion. I've done this for 34 years. Anybody can go to cbp.gov and look at the data. We handed this administration the most secure border, and within months, we went from the most secure border to historic illegal immigration, numbers we've never seen before. And it's not because it's seasonal. It's not because of climate change. It's not because of Trump. This is by design.
And now then we have to face the issue. What are we going to do? Now, look, let's call it what it is. There's also those on the Republican side that are excited about using this opportunity as a political tool against the administration, against the Democrats, especially heading into the November election. They don't want to make a deal. They don't want to do a bipartisan deal. And so they bear some burden of the responsibility. And I'm not offloading this all on Biden. It's a mutual issue. It's all the guys across the street here. They're all part of the problem here. So this is not just something that the president says. So I want to be clear on that point here. But I'm saying, as an American, you guys get it done. I don't want to hear any more complaints. I don't want to hear any more arguments and excuses about how it's the other side's fault and nothing gets done. The border stays open and it is as porous as it can possibly be. It is time to get things done. But whatever the president's going to say tonight, that's the truth. That's what's happening on your border. Now, let's take a bit of a shift here, and let's go into what the State of the Union, what the president should say tonight. Now, as I said at the outset, he's going to tell you everything is great under his administration. Vote for me again. Yay, we're great. I've just told you what the real issue is on these 4 hugely important issues here. Now, if the president was going to really provide leadership for our country, then there's a few things that he could say to us, that he should say to us that would be great and that would represent a true difference in the possibilities and in the future of our country. One of the great things about our country has always been the leadership. You keep hearing people talk all the time. I mean, for decades, people keep talking about, the American leadership. Well, right now, folks, our leadership is in free fall. And again, let me point out, this is not just Biden. This is not just Republican or Democrat issue. All leaders at the elite level have been messing things up for a long time. It's just right now that the Democrats are in power, they're in the administration, so it's on their shelf right now. They're the ones that could fix this, but we all got us into this problem. The leadership across the board, it is a bipartisan issue in a bad way, unfortunately. But if we're going to turn this around, whether Biden wins again, whether it's somebody else besides Biden in there, whether it's Trump or some other dark horse, somebody's going to have to do something different if we're going to recover, because the damage that has been done to us already at our own hands is significant. And as I just pointed out there, just in the Russia situation alone, that if we keep doing it in a wrong way, that could cause us to go into a nuclear catastrophe. If we mess it up with China, that could be catastrophic for our interests for generations to come. I mean, it could just ruin everything that we have built up since the end of the Second World War. A lot is at stake here. It's a big deal, not some minor issue here. And so I'm going to lay out a few things that the president could say tonight and what I wish he would do that can help us out, that can help to start stopping the damage that's been done and to start moving us in a positive direction that would help our country. Now, I'll just tell you at the outset, some of the things that I'm going to say is going to make some people go, oh, that's terrible. That's weakness. That would just show weakness to our enemies. And I'll tell you, one of the reasons many are going to reflexively think that is because they keep hearing this over and over.
Extreme weather disrupts supply chains, causing delays and shortages for consumers and businesses. Climate change is literally an existential threat to our nation and to the world. We're the United States of America, for God's sake. The most powerful nation in the history, not in the world, in the history of the world. The history of the world.
Yeah, we're not the most powerful nation in the history of the world, because that mentality makes you think we can do anything we want. Reality is not a limitation for us. If we don't like the way something is, we can just decide it's going to be different and we're going to go down this path. And that is exactly what we've done. And that is exactly why we're in the trouble that we're in right now. That's got to change because, folks, if you go with this spin long enough, eventually it comes crashing into reality, and reality wins every time. It eventually always happens, and it comes back to you. You don't need much more experience or evidence to that than to look back just a few years back, into August of 2021, when after 2 decades of lying to ourselves and operating on fiction and spin, then the Afghanistan war disintegrated and fell apart at our feet. And it blew up in our face because we wouldn't allow reality to go into. That's the cost and the consequence right there. Let that image, that's indelible into our image right now. Let's let it stay there for a minute, because what we need to do is fix that so that we don't keep running into more of these. And because, as I said, it could happen further on. So with no more ado, let's run into what we should do. First of all, let's go to Taiwan. Instead of saying that we're going to fight for Taiwan when we have no defense treaty to do so, it would be a foolhardy thing to do, because we don't have the military capacity to even fight that, much less sustain it over time, and it would have every possibility of going nuclear. So that alone should say that we're not going to do it. What we should instead do is to say, listen, privately, we should tell Taiwan, we're not going to fight for you. Publicly, we'll stay with the strategic ambiguity, because who knows, maybe conditions could change at some point that might make it in our interest to do so. I can't imagine it, but sure, let's stay ambiguous about it. But privately, tell them, folks, we're not coming to fight for you. So with that truth, now that the authorities on Taiwan don't even have the fiction in their minds of saying, but maybe the U.S. would fight our war for us and keep us so that we don't have to do anything with China. What that would mean then is that they need to do the other thing we would say is, we encourage you to defend yourself. We encourage you to expand your national defense capacities. This so-called porcupine theory you may have heard, where they make themselves so painful for anybody to try to attack that it wouldn't be worth it, and they wouldn't be able to succeed. Do that. That also implies that diplomatically, between Taiwan and China, that you would say, hey, look, what do we need to do to keep the status quo going here? We don't want to be invaded. We don't want to be taken over by China. What do we need to do to just keep the status quo so that nobody has to fight? And then there are plenty of, Xi Jinping has all kinds of motivation to not go to war. They haven't since 1949. There's no reason it couldn't go on for another half a century without anything happening, because they have motivation to not have to put their military into a war, to not have to find out whether their capacity is weaker than they thought. And they want to keep doing business. Their idea is to do business. They know that it would be catastrophic for their own economy as well as for the rest of the globe. Nobody would win from this kind of thing. So there's every reason why China would let the status quo continue on. That would prevent there from being, or well, let me correct my words here. That would greatly reduce the chance for war. You can't ever say prevent, because there's always room for people to make dumb decisions and things go sideways. But it would be far less of a chance than the current environment right now, where we keep trying to poke China over all this, and we keep trying to do things that are not going to help, and the tensions between the two countries' militaries keeps growing. That's not helpful to anyone. That's what we should do right there. And I know a lot of people would say, yeah, but you're basically just surrendering Taiwan to China. That's nonsense. That's an elementary school. That's a more spin stuff, because it's not true. What it is it's a sane, rational thing to do that would protect the Taiwan people, would protect our military, so that we can continue to grow and to protect our own interests worldwide, not have to waste our forces on the ground in some absurd war with China that should never be fought. That is what makes sense, and that's what America should do with that. Next, into the Ukraine situation. I've laid it out so clear that it couldn't be any more unambiguous. Ukraine will never win the war. That's the starting point. They will never. So instead of going into the fiction and allowing people to believe that, yes, we can continue to fund them, and if only these $60 billion more dollars are cut loose, then they'll be able to win the war. They won't. So let's tell them, look, we're going to give you another tranche of money here, but there's a big string attached to this one. It's only going to help you to defend your current line of contact, to try and prevent Russia from going any further to the west, with the requirement that you start negotiating with Russia to get the best deal that you can. We'll help you. We'll provide incentives to Russia to make a deal. And they do. Just like China has incentive not to go to war in the Taiwan issue, Vladimir Putin has definite motivation and incentive to bring that war to an end. He absolutely does. We can help them ensure that. Simultaneously, we can continue saying, hey, NATO partners in Europe, continue to increase your national security capacity. Get up to that 2%, maybe get above it, especially for the eastern flank nations there, to provide for your own national security so you don't have to worry. The harder you make the eastern flank, the less likely that even any future Russian leaders may ever say, hey, let's try to take on the NATO countries. By the way, he's not going to, because they're not stupid. They're not suicidal. And they know that the Article 5 nuclear guarantee that involves NATO would trump any kind of a tactical, conventional attack. So that's not going to happen. But to make you feel better, go ahead and increase your national security capacity there. So that's what we should do. And then we should help Ukraine, for rebuilding, work with our European partners so that they have a future and a hope, and that the war can come to an end. If we care anything about the people of Ukraine, that's what we should be doing. That's what the president ought to say tonight, is that we care about them, and we care about the security of NATO, of Europe, and the United States, because that, my friend, is going to give us the best chance to avoid any possibility of war with Russia, to give everybody a chance to stop killing each other over there, to start rebuilding the country, to improving in economic issues back and forth, to stop this bleeding of money into a pointless drain of fighting. Everything benefits us from that position. That's what the president ought to do tonight. I'm going to be watching to see if that's what he does. In the Middle East, another one that's challenge the convention, but something that we absolutely should do because it would help us. We should tell Israel, we are going to now condition everything that we do from this point forward on a couple of things. Number one, your military forces must conform to the same standards that our military conforms to. When we are fighting in areas where there's enemy mixed in with civilian population, we have intelligence-driven operations that protect the population, prioritize the population, not just blow them up. So if you don't operate the same way that we do, and there would be a dramatic change in how they had to conduct their operations, No more bombs, no more bullets, no more money. Nothing else is coming into it. If you do, we're going to continue to help you just like we have in the past. And there has to be a path to a two-state solution, because let me just categorically state, if there is not a possibility of peace for Palestine and Israel, there will be no peace for Palestine or Israel. It's both or neither. There is no solution. There is no scenario on the planet to where Israel can have peace and Palestine not, and Israel successfully have peace. It's impossible. That's why I have kept saying emphatically that Israel is pursuing a political objective with military means that cannot be accomplished. They can't succeed because they are trying to kill their way to peace, and all they're doing is building up an extraordinary amount of hatred for them that it dwarfs anything that existed on the 6th of October. They're already to the point where it'll take a generation to tamp down what's already happened so far. But the longer we go, the longer it's going to take to get that done, because Netanyahu's going to be shocked here in some number of weeks, according to his estimate, when they so-called destroy Hamas and they've destroyed the last of these alleged 4 battalions, whatever. Now, where's the peace? That's a fair question that we should ask. We should put a microphone in his face and say, where's the peace now? You've destroyed all these people, and now then you have this horrific wreckage in the Gaza Strip and in the West Bank as well. That's, as much of a tinderbox today, more so in many cases than existed before, and Israel will not be safe. We can help them get there by just putting some strings on this money that makes sense, that's good for Israel, it's good for the Palestine, and it's good for America. And if Israel says, no, we're going to do it our own way, then we should say, then you're going to do it without our bombs and missiles and without our money. And then we should still do whatever we can for Palestine, because that's in America's interest. If we want to have the moral constraint to look around at anybody else in the world who's, killing people and just not caring about civilian populations in conflict, if we want to have the slightest possibility of influencing them against that, then we have to hold our own friends to that same standard. Folks, again, it's both or neither. If you want to have influence on like the Russians and these other people who are doing stuff around the world, that we want to hold them to a moral accountability and the so-called rules-based order, it has to apply to us. It has to apply to our friends equally. If it doesn't apply to both, it applies to neither. And then we have the law of the jungle, which is bad for humanity as well as the United States. That's what we should do. And I would love to hear the president say that tonight. He's not going to, but anyway, if I were giving that speech tonight, that's what you'd hear, some version of that. Now we'll finish with the border here. Whatever you want to do with immigration, whatever kind of rules you want to have, the border should be secured. That should be the non-negotiable. You talk about not even bipartisan. That should be unified. Everybody should agree with that. That whatever rules the Congress wants to pass, whatever compromises they come up with, the White House, House and Senate bills, whatever, the border must be secure. Because whatever policies you have are meaningless if you can't control who comes in. And we know that there are millions upon millions of people in our country right now. We have no idea who they are or what they're going to do. And it's just a rolling of the dice in a hope that some of those are not intentional adversaries planted inside the country and God going to who knows where that could somehow rise up if something happens elsewhere. I mean, why would we think that some of our adversaries would not send some of their people over and plant them ahead of time to cause trouble inside of our country if they should ever go to war with us? I mean, we were begging them to do that by having this open border. So get that border closed. I don't care what it takes, whether it's President Biden, President Trump should to win the next election, House, Senate, Republican, Democrat, don't care. Get it done. Get the damn border closed. And then you can spend however much time you want figuring out the policies that go into it and then apply them. But whatever the law is, follow it. That's not really hard. But why is it that all 4 of these issues are so challenging for us to do? Why can we not get these things done? Now, I told you a second ago, one of the reasons is because we just have this mentality that we can do anything we want because we say it. Because we've kind of gotten away with that for a long time, especially since the end of the Cold War. And in those first couple of decades before, we got into this mentality that we can literally do anything. That loss in Afghanistan should have been a huge wake-up call. That reality still is reality. And that spin can only go so far until it crashes into reality and bad things happen to it. That was an embarrassment for us. If we have a crash of reality and foolish policies in Asia or in Europe, and it turns into a full-on war where we're participants, not just providing weapons, we are going to be in a world of hurt. And folks, listen, right now, on March the 7th, 2024, we're not at war with anybody. We're not, our security is not at risk. Everything is possible right now. We can change course today and avoid all of these worst outcomes. Everything can be navigated and negotiated. But if we keep going on, what happened in Afghanistan is going to happen in one of these other places. And then it's going to be a generation to recover. Then you can't just change policies then you're going to be in serious, serious trouble. And I hope and I pray that leaders will arise somewhere, whether it's in the White House, whether it's in Congress, whether it's in the Senate, anybody. And look, I'm on the House side right now. Maybe somebody here will stand up and do something besides what they've been doing. I don't know, but I want to see it because you, viewers, Americans, deserve this kind of leadership. And we just deserve to live in a country where reality is actually acknowledged as reality and limitations are acknowledged like we all live. Every one of us understand in our own life, there's lots of things we'd like to do. We'd like to have a house twice as big as we have. We'd like to drive a nicer car. We'd like to take a lot of these vacations, but we have constraints on our income. We have constraints on our financial resources, and we do what we can, and then we make prioritizations. That's all I'm asking. Why can't the government be the same way as the rest of the entire country, all the millions of us? That's the kind of government I'd like to see. And I just pray to God we get some people coming up so that you have some options like that to vote for come November this year. Thanks very much. We appreciate you guys coming on today and watching all these shows. We ask you to subscribe because that's one of the best ways that we can continue to get the support that we need to keep having these shows, to keep bringing you the truth like this, the unintimidated and uncompromised truth that you deserve by having more people sign up so they get these shows too. So please pass this along to your friends. Hit that little subscribe button, and we will see you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.